Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here, those of you in the room, and those of you who are joining us online, whether it's via Zoom, Facebook Live, or Instagram. We are really delighted to have you here. It's our annual State of the Industry conference, well, press conference, and now we call it the Caribbean Tourism Performance Report, because that's what you expect of us. You want to know how the Caribbean performed and how we anticipate it's going to perform this year, and so the report will be given. But just a few things up front. First of all, those of you who are in the room here, and I will recognize the head table in just a moment, and everyone else, please keep your phone on silent. Gone are the days when I'd plead with you to turn off your phones, because we want you to keep your phones on now. We just want them on silent. And the reason we want you to keep your phones on is that you can tweet and post throughout the course of the event. We've got a hashtag, it is CTO Stats, CTO STATS 2018. So use that when you're posting, so we can follow that. And those of you on Instagram and Facebook and Zoom, you can do the same thing as well. For the media who are following online, if you do have questions, well, we know you do have questions, please key your questions in. I'm sure Sharon would have shared that with you already, but key your questions in so she can share the questions with our panel here, and we'll try to answer as many as possible. Those of you in the room, you put your hand up, we'll recognize you, you'll identify yourself and the media for whom you work. And when we do come to you, please make the questions as short as possible, keep them short. And the Secretary General has already given me his confirmation, both him and Ryan, that they will keep the answers shorter. Now, our head table, we've got the Secretary General of the CTO, Hugh Riley, and he will be saying a few words this morning. You'll hear from him. To his left is Ryan Skeet. Ryan is our acting head of research. And for a fleeting moment, you think you have seen a gentleman named Dr. Glenn Williams. Well, he's from you are in fact seeing him, you're okay. It's from the Caribbean Rum and Beer Festival, you see. So he is here, and for a very important reason that they're here. You will recall in September of last year, a number of our member countries were hit, devastated, some of them by hurricanes. And Cheryl Collymore, who is over there from the Caribbean Rum and Beer Festival, contacted me and said, look, we're willing to help. And so this morning, the first order of business is that they'll be presenting a check. They are people of their word and presenting a check to us that will be received by the Secretary General. And right after that, we will go over to Belize, who will also make an announcement regarding support for the CTO Hurricane Fund, or Relief Fund, as we now call it. So let me now introduce the Secretary General, and let's call Dr. Williams to the front, where they'll make the presentation, and then Dr. Williams will share a few words with you. Let's say a few words first. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, just a few words from me. First of all, I'd like to thank the CTO for working with us for this year's Caribbean Rum and Beer Festival, which was held at the grounds of Rockley Golf Club on December the 9th. The festival's in its 7th year, and what we try to do is to make it a truly Caribbean event where we showcase various products from the Caribbean, rums and beers, and we travel around various countries in the Caribbean, putting our festival on. One of this year's highlights was a golf competition at Rockley Golf Club. The golf competition attracted 60 different players, and the star prize was a draw, which was for a week's luxury accommodation in Miami, and that was put up by one of CTO's partners, Interval Holidays. So our many thanks to CTO Interval Holidays for that prize. The prize was open to all, basically. and you had to be in it to win it, sort of thing. And it was won by a lady called Linda Cranborough McLeod, who is a Barbadian international golfer. So there was a good set of credentials for that person who won that prize. Of course, there were many other prizes, basically, and that also added to the attraction to get people to come and play in the competition. And so I must give thanks to Discovery Bay by Rex for an inclusive weekend for two, to Coconut Court for a weekend stay, C&G International, Shakers Bar and Grill, Nicholas Abbey, and the Brew House. And I would also like to thank the Director of Golf and staff of Rockley Golf Club for working with us. And I would like to mention that the event will be held again December the 8th, and a fuller version of the Caribbean Rum and Beer Festival is planned for 2019. And so the event raised money, as we said at the very beginning, for the Caribbean CTO's Hurricane Disaster Fund. And I'd now like to hand over that check to Mr. Hugh Riley.
Gentlemen, if you come a little closer to the camera, please. Thank you very much. So, thank you very much. Thank you. Just turn the envelope so we can see that you're getting money.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Just on behalf of the entire Caribbean Tourism Organization family, we'd like to wish Dr. Williams and the organizers of the Caribbean Rum and Beer Festival continued success. And on behalf of all of the affected countries of the Caribbean, those who were impacted in the hurricanes of 2017, I'd like to say a very hearty thank you for your kindness and your generosity. Thank you for your consideration. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Hugh.
Sure.
Thank you very much. And next you will have projected on the screen as soon as possible the representative from Belize, who will just talk a little bit about what they've done and what the amount is that they're contributing to the fund. My colleague here, Sharon, is pulling up the video feed from Belize and making sure that everything is fine. And then we will proceed. And right after that, as I said, Ryan will present this thing. What's that? Okay. That's why they can't see a thing.
You can speak to Karen.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, good morning.
It's a bit early in Belize. It's just about 9 o'clock, a little past 9 o'clock in Belize.
Yeah.
And you're in Belize City, aren't you? Hi, Karen.
Yeah.
Hi, good morning. Early in Belize.
Definitely.
Just give me 1 second.
That's the delay. Yeah.
CTO Secretary General, Ms. Cheryl Collymore, other members of the CTO family, viewers, the media, ladies and gentlemen, warm greetings from Belize. Thank you for affording me the opportunity to make my presentation on behalf of the BTB and Belize. When we learned about the physical devastation of Hurricanes Irma and Maria last year, our hearts were too terribly devastated because Belize, we know from personal experience, the hardship these natural disasters can impose on a country and its citizens. We were comforted nevertheless with the notion that the Almighty would chart a way forward for our sister Caribbean countries in their recovery efforts, and so they always remained in our prayers. Therefore, when we got the news of the Caribbean Relief Fund campaign, we embraced it immediately because it was not only the right thing to do, but also because it brought us all together, the Caribbean, once again, even closer in a unified effort to assist those in need. As a part of its Dollar for the Caribbean Relief Fund campaign, Each participating tourism stakeholder also donated $1 for every guest. The BTB then contributed by donating $1 for every tourist arrival for the month of October, therefore creating a multiplier effect. The BTB initiative was supported by the Belize Tourism Industry Association, the Belize Hotel Association, Tropic Air, the Belize Airport Concession Company, tour operators, water taxis, and hoteliers, amongst many others. The BTB is extremely pleased that it was able to lead the efforts of the Caribbean Relief Fund campaign in Belize, and I take this opportunity to offer our heartfelt thanks to all the Belizean stakeholders and organizations that donated generously. I also wish to thank our BTB staff who were involved in promoting and publicizing the campaign. It will take more than this amount to help the affected countries to fully recover, but I am sure it will certainly put them in the right direction. Mr. Secretary General, it gives me great pleasure to present this check for the amount of $59,934 to the Caribbean Tourism Organization on behalf of the Belize Tourism Board and the entire country of Belize. The funds have already been transferred to the CTO account. Thank you, and may God bless us all. Here's the check.
Together to help our fellow country.
Did you see the check?
For $59,934. Thank you, Belize, on behalf of the entire Caribbean family.
Okay, thank you once again, Belize. And total then was is Neil back there, who is our finance now. He just popped out 150. Belize was a major contributor here. Also, British Airways, a major contributor, £5,000, and we also thank Caribbean Rum and Beer Festival for their contribution as well, as we seek to assist our member countries and our Caribbean citizens impacted by the storms. Now I'd like to introduce Ryan Skeet. Ryan is our acting head of research, director of research here at the CTO. They worked really very hard to bring the figures together to present the report. Ryan.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are delighted to report that Caribbean tourism has reached another major milestone, surpassing 30 million stayover visits and reaching an estimated $37 billion in total visitor expenditure. This good news is despite the devastating September hurricanes. The performance in 2017 was primarily supported by sustained economic growth in all of our major source markets. Stayover visits were on track for a strong performance during the first half of 2017, growing by an estimated 4.8%. However, there was a major slowdown in the second half performance due to the impact of the September hurricanes, as tourist visits declined by 1.7%. These outcomes resulted in an overall increase of 1.7% to reach 30.1 million visits, marking the 8th consecutive year of growth, albeit slower than the average global growth rate of 6.7%. Therefore, the Caribbean market share shrank by 0.1 percentage points to register 2.3% of the market. Among the destinations, tourist arrivals showed uneven growth. Several countries reported double-digit increases in 2017, such as St. Lucia, Belize, and Bermuda, while the hurricane-impacted countries reported declines ranging from -18 to -7%. The contributing factors to the excellent performances in those countries included greater access from the source markets to the region and the realization of significant investments, including hotels, to enhance the tourism product. Regarding the major Caribbean subregions, the U.S. territories, the Dutch Caribbean, and the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States reported declines, while the grouping, dubbed Other Caribbean, comprising of Cancun, Cozumel, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Haiti, and Suriname, which accounts for almost half of all arrivals to the region, recorded an increase of 6%. And the CARICOM grouping recorded an increase of 1.7%. Most major source markets recorded growth except the South American and Caribbean markets, which declined by 6.5% and 1.3% respectively, reflecting weak economic conditions. Our major source market, the US, grew by approximately 0.5% to reach an estimated 14.9 million visits to the region. This performance was attributed to solid economic growth, low unemployment rate, and high consumer confidence in the US. Visits from the European market totaled 5.8 million, an improvement of an estimated 6.2%, the strongest growth among the main markets. In spite of terrorist attacks in some countries, some European countries, and the continuing Brexit negotiations and the related uncertainties. Visits from the Canadian market rebounded in 2017, growing by 4.3% compared to a decline of 3.1% in 2016. The country's strong economic performance and increased seat capacity to the region helped support this recovery. Despite the modest increase in arrivals to the region, hotel occupancy fell by 1.2%, according to STR, or formerly known as Smith Travel Research, a US company that tracks supply and demand data for the hotel industry. However, the primary revenue metrics were all up. Average daily rate increased by 1.9%, and revenue per available room grew by 0.7%. The September hurricanes caused significant disruption for airlines during the final quarter of 2017. As a result, seat capacity fell by 7.2% in the fourth quarter, according to OAG, an air travel intelligence company. Nevertheless, overall seat capacity increased by 1.7% in 2017, reflecting a solid first half performance. Cruise passenger arrivals also set a new landmark in 2017, despite the hurricanes, reaching an estimated 27 million visits to the region, which is 2.4% higher than the numbers recorded in 2016. The cruise passengers' performance mirrors the performance of tourist arrivals. It grew strongly in the first half of the year and contracted marginally in the second half of the year. Indeed, in the September month, cruise arrivals declined by some 20%. However, growth quickly resumed in October, which saw a 2% increase. Consistent with increases in stayover arrivals and cruise visits, total visitor expenditure is estimated to have increased by 2.6% to reach $37 billion in 2017. This performance marks the 8th consecutive year of growth. Overall, stayover visitors spent an estimated $34.2 billion or $1,230 per trip. Global economic conditions are expected to be favorable in 2018. All of the major economies are projected to grow strongly. Oil prices are expected to remain relatively low, and hourly wages are expected to increase again in the US following years of stagnation. These factors bode well for tourism in the Caribbean. On the downside, there is rising geopolitical tensions, the persistent threat of terrorist attacks, and the heightened risk of extreme weather events. All taken together, we are projecting that tourist arrivals will increase between 2% and 3% in 2018. According to the Florida Caribbean Cruise Association, booking data indicates that demand for Caribbean cruises remain quite strong. This demand is supported by their multimedia campaign called The Caribbean is Open, which was launched soon after the hurricanes. Consequently, we project that cruise arrivals will accelerate in 2018 to register a growth rate of between 2% and 3% as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. If there are any questions, and I anticipate there will be, just hold on to them, and we'll get to you a little bit later with the questions. Now, I'd like to introduce once again the Secretary General, Hugh Riley.
Thank you, Johnson. Thank you, Ryan. Good morning, everyone. Well, good afternoon to some of you, depending upon where you're joining us in the world. As you heard in the report from our head of research, Ryan Skeet, arrivals to the region hit a new record in 2017, 30 million stayover visits and visitor expenditure of $37 billion. In short, despite the challenges in 2017, more visitors arrived in the Caribbean and they spent more. But is that enough? Is our work now done? Not by a long way. The Caribbean, with our highly competitive tourism product, has quite some distance to go in order to realize our full potential. We will say more about that in just a minute. But first, coming up in the weeks and months ahead are occasions when the CTO will be sharing with the public and with industry shareholders, stakeholders, more and more detail on our plans to better capitalize on the opportunities that are available to the Caribbean. So quickly, I'd just like to point out a number of activities that are occurring, which we invite your attention to. March 21 and 22, there's the Organization of American States Ministerial Congress in Georgetown under the leadership of the Department of Tourism in the Ministry of Business in Guyana. That Congress will assemble policymakers and industry executives to propose strategies for bringing the countries of the Americas closer together in the pursuit of sustainable tourism. All ministers of tourism in the Americas are invited to attend. That's in Guyana next month, March 21 and 22. Our own Caribbean Week in New York is June 2 to 8. That's an annual CTO event showcasing the diversity of the Caribbean in one of the region's major source markets, New York City. The week starts with the Caribbean Travel Fair on June 2nd, and it ends with the really very popular Rum and Rhythm on June 8th. During Caribbean Week in New York, the spire of the Empire State Building is lit with the colors of the Caribbean, and it is always an occasion of enormous pride for people of the Caribbean to see this icon of New York and American culture bearing the colors of the Caribbean. So that's Caribbean Week in New York, June 2 to 8. And later that month, there is also Rum and Rhythm in Toronto, which is also organized by us, by the Caribbean Tourism Organization, and that's billed as the Ultimate Caribbean Epicurean Experience. That's June 23rd in Toronto. I'd like also to point out that the State of the Tourism Industry Conference, this is the CTO's annual conference, will this year be held at the Atlantis Resort on Paradise Island in the Bahamas, October 23 to 26. And this year's theme is Rejuvenate, Recreate, Reconnect, New Directions for Caribbean Tourism. And as you are aware, 2018 is the year of rejuvenation in the Caribbean. And so many of our CTO member countries have embarked on programs that connect to the multi-billion-dollar rejuvenation, spa, and wellness industry. So the state of Caribbean tourism is going to be discussed in the Bahamas, 23rd to the 26th of October. And then the following month, November, there's our CTO Human Resource Conference, which we held in the Cayman Islands. Building a resilient Caribbean tourism workforce for global competitiveness is the theme. And in fact, human capital development is one of our 7 strategic areas of focus for the region for this year. We urge you to keep visiting onecaribbean.org for more details on these and other events, and make sure that you are not left out of these important opportunities to hear from the industry, to challenge the experts, and to let your own opinions be heard on the direction for Caribbean tourism. 2 weeks ago at meetings in San Juan, Puerto Rico, the CTO's board of directors accepted our strategic plan for 2018 to 2022. And with that decisive action, the board approved 7 strategic functional areas and reinforced the CTO's mandate to position the Caribbean as the most desirable year-round warm weather destination. But if that really is to happen, we cannot simply stop at the results which we reported today. As a region, we must acknowledge that to rebuild, develop, and sustain the infrastructure and the image of the Caribbean is an immense task. Resources will need to be developed, and realistic attention will need to be paid to the length of time it takes to rebuild an economy and to repair a brand seriously affected by natural disasters. Reinforcing the value and the attributes of the Caribbean brand, educating the people and the travel industry, the public really, and the travel industry on the geography of the Caribbean, and generating demand for the region's tourism product will take time, careful strategy, and money. In other words, establishing leadership of the Caribbean brand requires more than just sparsely funded ad hoc efforts. Our first order of business, therefore, as a region, is to stop treating tourism as some sort of casual pursuit. Tourism is a serious business. It employs directly and indirectly 13.7% of the people of the Caribbean, and it contributes in total from 7% to over 80% to domestic to GDP, gross domestic product, across the region. Tourism is the business that delivers foreign exchange every time a plane lands and the cruise ship docks. It reduces unemployment and delivers massive amounts of tax dollars to our national treasuries. Therefore, we should worry when we are not using this job-creating, tax-generating, foreign exchange earning machine to its full potential. We should worry when the rate of occupancy across the region is still below 70%, which means that of every 100 rooms available in the Caribbean, 30 are going empty every night. This tells us that we have an opportunity, in fact, a responsibility, to market ourselves more effectively, to improve the quality of our service substantially, to enhance the value of our product significantly, and to fill those empty rooms. Until we do those things, we are not capitalizing on the substantial investment we have already made in building the plant in the first place. And we are leaving ourselves vulnerable to further erosion of our competitive position. When we talk about truly engaging our region's populations in the business of tourism, our countries must institute the tourism satellite account systems that allow us to follow the tourism dollar through our economies so that we can help our countries to truly understand the number of visitors it takes to outfit a school with computers or a hospital with the latest equipment. So yes, this business can truly be the lifeblood of the Caribbean, but we have to treat it more seriously. Now, to be clear, we are thankful for the results which the region achieved in 2017. We have to celebrate our victories, and we do. But unfortunately, there are bigger celebrations occurring in the places that are stealing our market share. Their unemployment rates are falling, their economies are growing, their tourism product gets consistent visibility, and we must go to that point too. The Caribbean Tourism Organization and the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association, CHTA, are working hand in hand with other industry partners to implement a plan that will address these issues. The funding for a short-term Caribbean regional marketing campaign is starting to come in now, and the arrangements are in place to tell the world we are serious about using our God-given assets to put our region's economy in the position of strength where it belongs. In this highly competitive business, we have to keep fighting in the Caribbean, and we have to win. I'm going to pause here and introduce an industry partner who certainly knows about winning. Alex Zozaya is the Chief Executive Officer of Apple Leisure Group, ALG, a hospitality powerhouse comprised of Apple Vacations, Travel Impressions, CheapCaribbean.com, AM Resorts, Amstar DMC, and Unlimited Vacation Club. Alex, as AM Resorts founder and president, has guided the group's record-breaking growth and secured ALG's status as the world's #1 provider of North American vacation travelers to the Caribbean and to Mexico. So his company supplies more vacationers to our region than anyone else. So on the line now is Alex Zozaya, the president and CEO. How are you, Alex?
How are you, Hugh?
I'm very well, thank you, Alex. We have a considerable advantage over you, Alex. We are in the Caribbean.
Yeah, I know, I'm in Philadelphia.
Yeah, it's a little colder there than it is here. What I can say to you is, I wish you were here.
Yeah, I wish that too, but bad weather is good for our business, so keep the bad weather coming in the Northeast.
Thank you, keep it coming, keep it coming. So what are you seeing, Alex? What's the status? You've heard from Ryan Skeeter, our head of research. You've heard what the region is doing from our point of view, the numbers that we're seeing. What are you seeing?
Well, I see overall positive news. 2017, despite the headwinds that we had mainly from Mother Nature and the form of hurricanes to the region, but not only that, we had politics involved, we had perception, we had news. I think perception actually affected the business even more than the hurricanes themselves. But despite all that, there was a growth. We end up closing the year, as it was mentioned before, but particularly coming from the US to the Caribbean, was still a growth, even including the destinations that were mostly damaged. That being said, as it was mentioned before, the perception of the Caribbean not being fully back in business, it's obviously affecting a little bit 2018, although we're seeing a strong recovery in 18. For the first half of 18, we see a big growth, about 10% growth versus last year, including those destinations that are not fully recovered. So I think overall, I see good news. The market is growing. The overall number of Americans traveling outside of the country continues to grow, despite the rhetoric of staying home type of discourse that we've been hearing. So overall, I see good news for the travel industry and particularly for the region, for the Caribbean and Mexico.
What's our direction from here on, Alex? I mean, what would you recommend that we should do as a region to improve our position, to grow even further?
Yeah, thanks you. Well, I think that, as you well mentioned, we shouldn't consider that the job is done, because the potential we have ahead of us is tremendous, particularly coming from the US. As it was mentioned, only 14 million passengers from the US went to the Caribbean, which, I mean, it's a good number, but it's really nothing compared to the size of the potential. If you see the market of 330 million being so close to the Caribbean, and you see the Americans wanting to stay close to home, the value proposition they find in the Caribbean, the length of stay, which is being reduced, put the long-haul destinations into disadvantage versus the short-haul destinations into advantage. So particularly for the US market, I think there's so much more that we have to do in order to gain market share to the region. I think a very important factor is also to see what's going on with the cruise ship industry. The cruises are doing very well. They're taking a market share from land passengers, and it will be very interesting to understand in terms of taxes and in terms of revenue generation and job generation in the region, what is the contribution from the cruise ship industry. But I have to say, even though the cruise ship industry is important, clearly the land passengers are way more important for the communities, for the revenues, for taxes, tax purposes, etc. And on that aspect, I think there's so much more that we have to do. I mean, 14 million from a 330 million market. Clearly, there's a lot of room for growth in market share in the US to the region.
Your point's very well taken, Alex. There's some things that we should do, and we are, in fact, very focused to getting together with our partners. The Caribbean Tourism Organization is joining forces with the CHTA and with the FCCA, with our cruise partners as well, to make sure that the Caribbean takes full advantage of the really very strong competitive position that we have. We are blessed with beauty and accessibility and stability and all of the elements that should really make us the leader in the tourism sector in this highly competitive business. So there's some gap yet that we need to fill in terms of reaching that full potential. I don't want to miss the opportunity, Alex, to say thank you to you and to ALG for the tremendous contribution that you make to our livelihood. You are, after all, the leading producer of business to this part of the world.
Yeah, no, thank you. And of course, it's not just us. There's so many very important players. I think the airlines, for example, play a significant role. What we see in the connectivity, a little bit concerning that the price of the airfares are going up. I think that obviously we should promote more competition, more connectivity, more direct point-to-point flights from the US to different places in the Caribbean. We already saw the impact of closing the airport in Houston, as well as Fort Lauderdale and Miami during the hurricanes, and then San Juan as a hub, San Juan in Puerto Rico. So what we could see after the crisis that we had during the fall is that we certainly need more point-to-point flights, increase the connectivity hopefully be more competitive in pricing when it comes to flying to the Caribbean. That would increase traffic and would increase the value proposition.
And finally, your point is very strongly taken about the importance of San Juan, Puerto Rico, because of its geography and the infrastructure as a hub for the rest of the Caribbean. And we were delighted to see so many people turn out from the industry for the CHDA's marketplace in San Juan. And clearly, Puerto Rico is strongly on the way back. Alex Azaya, thank you very much for the time spent. Alex has agreed to stay with us for a few minutes. So Johnson John Rose, we're into the question and answer period now. And if there are any questions for Alex, he has agreed to stay for a few minutes and answer those. And then we'll answer questions that you have for us.
Thank you, Hugh.
Okay. We will try as best as we can to have some questions here and some of the questions from the people online. So we'll begin in the room since you're here. If you do have a question, please identify yourself and your media and your question, please.
Two questions. Steve, you mentioned hotel occupancy declined a bit. I was wondering if this was maybe due to Airbnb. I know, the CTO spoke before about in terms of regulating this industry. Where does the CTO stand with that? Increasing, interest in Airbnb. And also, Alex mentioned a good point about perception and the perception that, the Caribbean was not open for business. But what about the other perceptions that are going up in terms of even not only crime, but in Barbados, the sewage issue? We have advisories out there. What are we doing to manage this perception in the Caribbean? And also in terms of planning for tourism and planning for these issues and infrastructure, where are we going with these issues as well?
I don't know if that question was for me. I hope not, because I couldn't hear.
Well, perhaps we can, if we could answer if you could ask Alex then to address the Alex part of the question. If you could just restate the Alex question, and then we'll switch.
Yeah, no, I was just talking about perception. How do we deal with that perception that the Caribbean is not open for business? Because, that is what people go with, not necessarily what is really the truth, but the perception. So that would be
Okay, so Alex, the question is, how do you deal with that perception that you mentioned about the Caribbean not being open for business? So that's the part of the question for you, Alex, and then we will deal with the other part, SG.
Sure. Well, certainly perception becomes reality, and perception is all that matters when it comes to driving business. And so we combat that misperception with information. We certainly rely heavily on travel agents when it comes to being able to inform the customer better. But we did everything from maps that clearly show that a very small portion of the Caribbean was actually affected right after the hurricanes. And then the other green areas, we actually put them in green, the areas that were ready for business right after the hurricane, to make sure that we have enough information out there to the main customers. It's easier to do to the travel agent, because the travel agent, obviously, that's what they do professionally, and they're responsible to inform to the consumer. But also to the consumer, we also make sure that on all of our websites and all of our statements and press releases and everything, we keep informing that the Caribbean is open for business. So the perception, yes, through PR and crisis management and promotion, but also by taking fan trips and travel agents to the destination and broadcast live from the destinations to the consumer. We just did a program to Good Morning America in open television in the U.S. that was clearly showing a destination that is fully, it's great for business, and it's perfectly fine after the hurricane. So I think it's mainly PR, crisis management, promotion, and of course our statements.
Thank you. SG.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated, Alex. Your question about Airbnb it's an interesting one. Airbnb is a growing phenomenon. The sharing economy generally, home stays are a growing phenomenon. And from our point of view, we're extremely happy that the Caribbean is a part of that. It's a consumer demand driven part of the tourism sector. and the Caribbean doesn't want to be excluded from that. No question that hotel accommodations in the traditional sense need to be supported so that they can continue to thrive as well. But the two types of vacation certainly can run parallel, and they can coexist in the Caribbean. Airbnb has been brought into our midst a number of times by the Caribbean Tourism Organization, so that we have introduced Airbnb's senior executives to our member countries so that they can interact and so that they can themselves answer the question that you have asked for our individual countries. How does it work in a particular country? But yes, it's a growing phenomenon. Airbnb reports now that there are over 40,000 hosts in the Caribbean, and that number appears to be growing.
And sorry, Hugh, I totally agree with what you just said. I just want to add for Airbnb, all competition is welcome. They can really live with each other, but it has to be fair competition. Airbnb must be regulated and must pay taxes, the same taxes that the hotel pays.
There is a question from Jill Stone that came online. That's again to Alex, and it's got to do with the portion of his business segment of his. It's on the screen. Yeah. So I've got it. Yeah. So Jill, for Apple, what segment of your business took the biggest hit when it comes to the hotel guests in the Caribbean, and families, couples, etc.?
Well, I would say the most affected was, unfortunately, the highest paid customer, the ones who book with long time in advance, incentive groups particularly, and then weddings. I think weddings and incentives, the ones who plan in advance, that were the most sensitive of what was going on. It requires a lot more sophistication and logistics to plan a trip like that, a connectivity from different parts of the United States, and therefore that was the most affected. I think we lost market share on that business to the domestic traveler in the U.S. In other words, weddings and groups, particularly incentive groups, moved from certain parts of the Caribbean to travel domestically within the U.S.
Okay. Emmanuel Joseph, I know you had your hand up, so I think now is a good time to ask that question, and then we'll go back for one of the questions online.
Great. Nan Joseph, Barbados Today. Want to know how Barbados performed and what's the outlook for 2018?
All right. Well, the statistics are in the hands of our head of research on the specific individual member countries, and anything that is publicly available is already online, I believe. Is that correct to say? Will be online in 12 hours. So if we could reserve the questions about specific member countries and their performance, let us make sure that we put those up online. And in the meantime, of course, we'll make any officials available to you that you can ask those questions of specifically in regard to any member country of the CTO.
Hugh, sorry, I just want to add to that question that for us, from the US market, of course, we see for 2018 a growth of 8 to 10% overall versus same time last year. And if we remove the most affected islands of Puerto Rico, San Martin, and the US and British Virgin Islands, the growth is in between 12 and 13% versus same time last year. So it's good news.
Okay, thank you. I've got a few questions here from CNBC, so I'll just roll them up into one. So we've got one brief response. And first of all, dealt with a percentage of hotels that were back online from the hurricanes. I think you would have dealt with that, wouldn't you, in your presentation? The overall percentage of hotel rooms available this season versus last. I'd like you to tackle that, Ryan, if possible. And what parts of the Caribbean are faring best, worst post hurricanes? So I'd like you to handle those, Ryan.
All right. So a lot of the data on the hotels has been very kindly supplied by the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association, which is the representative of the majority of hotels around the region. So we'll quote from that in a minute. If I could also, though, say that the countries of the CTO are steadfastly working to get together, to get back on track. So they're at various different stages of the rebuild and recover process. And so, yes, there were some that really took those two hurricanes on the chin, but they're all on the way back, and there are various different stages. So that information is also available on our website, which will help you to see what the individual member countries are saying is their stage of recovery. OneCaribbean.org is a really very good place to go for that information. But firsthand, Ryan Ski.
Thank you. Regarding the most severely impacted countries, these include BVI, USVI, St. Martin's, Anguilla, and Dominica. According to the CHTA, there are 129 CHTA members in these countries, and 49% of these properties are now open. And these properties, and we do not count the properties that are only hosting relief workers. So these are actually visitors in these properties. An additional 19% of the closed properties are expected to reopen September 2018. And between September and December, we expect another 32% of the properties to reopen as well.
Thank you. Let me just add there. We've compiled the updates from most of the worst affected countries as of yesterday, where they were, and as soon as possible after the briefing, I will ship that to everyone, so you'll have it in your inbox. Yeah. And then Sharon will have it on One Caribbean as well, so you can tune in there. Any other questions? If we have no more questions for Alex, are there any other questions for Alex? So we can let him go. Alex, I'd like to thank you very much on behalf of the Secretary General and all of us. Thank you so much for giving us some of your time.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure.
Any other questions from the room? Because I've got quite a few here that I'd like to share. Okay. I know Manny is going to ask the Secretary General when this is finished for one-on-one. I know that. And so does he. Kristen Hogg in Canada asked, during the CHTA conference in Puerto Rico, it was echoed that there was a major problem with the Caribbean being identified as one brand. In the aftermath of the hurricanes, people were hesitant to come back because they think every single country must have been affected. How is the CTO working to change this mindset, especially when it's a big chunk of visitors to the Caribbean are in the all-inclusive type? That's yours, SJ.
Well, I think she's right. I mean, there is the theme that we use is one sea, one voice, one Caribbean. That treats the Caribbean as a destination that visitors from overseas should consider. We want people to think of coming to the region before they even understand whether they should visit one versus the other. They need to think Caribbean as opposed to some other parts of the world. But one Caribbean doesn't mean by any stretch that we are all the same. And one doesn't mean that we are somehow connected to the point that when a disaster affects one, the entire region is out of the business. I think that the recent hurricanes actually illustrate the fact that parts of the Caribbean can continue to function effectively while we help our impacted neighbors to continue to get back on their feet. So the answer is really constant visibility. We have to be constantly in front of the public's face with messages that help them to understand the geography, the spatial relationships between one country and another, and money needs to be spent on helping to make that happen, to market the Caribbean effectively so that our various publics understand where we are in relation to each other.
I've got two questions here from Jim and Jill. Jim Byers wants to know what percentage of the business, if we know, was triggered by travel agents. And if we do know that. And Jill wants to know, if we remove Mexico, how did the rest of the Caribbean do in terms of the numbers?
I'll let Ryan tackle that second question. Sorry, what was that? The first part of the question was?
The first question from Jim was travel agent business?
The whole industry wants a specific answer to that. There isn't any question that travel agents are, again, tremendously powerful influencers in the booking of Caribbean vacations. So that is very clear. Exactly what that percentage isn't available, apparently, anywhere that we can find, except to say that a growing number of cases indicate that travel agents are incredibly important as influencers. People come at their vacation decision from various angles, and a lot of research is being done online. Certainly, there are online sources that help that, but travel agents are more and more important in the booking process. We're still trying to find exactly what that figure is, and one suspects that it's going to vary from one member country of the CTO to another as well, for all kinds of obvious reasons. But the best answer that we have at this point is that travel agents are increasingly important, and there has been a resurgence of that importance of travel agents in booking Caribbean vacations.
Thank you for that interesting question. If we remove the Mexican Caribbean, they represent about 10% of total visits. So there would be a fall off in the growth rate, but we don't have those numbers to hand right now. So we can get back to you on those numbers, but we believe that yes, certainly there will be a slightly lower growth rate if we remove Mexico Caribbean, because they were not impacted by the hurricanes, and they grew relatively well in 2017.
No other questions in the room. Give you some time. We did promise you that we don't go past an hour, so we are going to wrap it up right now. If there are any other questions that come in online, we assure you that we will answer and respond to every single question that comes online. So the responses will be there. I do want to thank everyone who's followed up, people like Gay Myers and Brian Major. These are travel writers, and Jim and so many of the others. Is there one question you'd like me to take? Can you just shout it to me so I can?
Do you have a breakdown of leisure and business travel for those 30.1 million overall visitors?
Ryan.
No, currently we don't have that type of breakdown. My estimate would be, my estimate would be that towards the end of May, we would have a better idea of what the breakdown is as we get more detailed information from our members.
Valuable outcome of the Caribbean operating under one brand. That's SG, I think the greatest advantage of the Caribbean as one brand.
Oh, the greatest advantage. Yeah. Well, there are a few. First and foremost, we are able to laud the fact that under that one brand, there is tremendous diversity. There's French and Dutch and Spanish and English and Big Island and Small Island and Flat Island and Mountainous Island, white sand beaches, black sand beaches, no island at all. Some are not islands at all. There's that diversity of product within the Caribbean brand. And there really isn't much that we can say that compares with the Caribbean anywhere in the world. So the Caribbean is a very powerful umbrella brand for all of the diversity that we talked about. Secondly, the Caribbean brand is extremely well known. The Caribbean brand is better known than individual country brands. And to have some of our member countries that are less well known bask under the aegis of that Caribbean brand is a tremendous fillip to their own marketing efforts. So the strength of the brand, the positivity of the image, the Caribbean has a very positive image worldwide. Those are brand strengths which we really should continue to take advantage of. People want to come to a part of the world that's very well known for its lifestyle. Yes, the rum and the rhythm and the lifestyle and the relaxed atmosphere of the Caribbean brand. So the Caribbean brand has a certain strong image to it, which it is to our tremendous advantage to market. And it most certainly is a help to the individual countries that, that fall under that brand.
Thank you. There were a couple of questions from Kristen Hogg, but Kristen, we promise you that we will respond to those questions online, and so you can find it there, so we can email you the responses to some of those questions as well. I do want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank Dr. Williams and Cheryl Collymore again for your generosity and for spending an hour with us. Alex, who has left, again for his insights, and everyone else. Our team in London just sent me a note here in terms of, let me find it. I think they've just found some additional funds and for the hurricane relief, for the relief fund, SG. So let me try to find that so I can just let you know how much.
I think it's fair to say
it's
that
fair to say, yeah. My team in London just sent me a note with a photo with an HSBC check. CTO Relief Fund, £13,150, Le Petit Mort. So that's additional fund, and they wanted us to mention that as we're here. Thank you all of you for coming. If you have any additional questions, don't forget to send me an email, send me a text message, something, and the Secretary General is always very, very willing to respond. I want to thank our team here as well from the office. Our Director for Resource Mobilization, Bonita Morgan, is here in the room. So is Sean Smith, who worked very hard with Ryan to put these things together. Angela, also from the Research Department, and Amanda Charles, who does sustainable, and Paul Garns, who was my photographer this morning. Thank you all, and we've got some refreshments. Okay, yes. The last word is always his. So
thank you.
Thank you. You know.
So that we can preserve our relationship with young Paula Harris, we need to remind you that all of the data that you have heard and seen is available to you in one form or another. The information that we compile varies from one member country to another, and countries and non-countries, other members of the CTO, private sector members of the CTO, want to have that data analyzed in ways that support their particular needs. That is a service that we provide, and the contact person is Paula Harris here at the Caribbean Tourism Organization. That data is available to you. Just contact us, contact Paula. Thank you.
Yeah. And sometimes the obvious is right before you, so you ignore it. And so the very obvious people who we totally ignored are the people who work really very hard outside of research to get this thing done. Sharon Coward, who's, I mean, you know, we couldn't get this thing streamed live without the expert help of Sharon, and been testing throughout the week to make sure this thing works very hard. So Sharon Coward of our IT department, and also Paula Harris and Claire Jones, who've been out there tweeting and posting on Facebook and getting this stuff out, and my boss over there, Christy Morris, who just tells me what to do and I do it. So thank you all, and we've got some refreshments out there, and I'm looking forward to the stories. Have a good one.
Thank you.
What's the amount that Dr.